Alright, and welcome back to my channel. I am Caen Dusk, and today I'm going to be rambling about one of my favorite topics, which, frankly, I don't get enough chance to talk about. That is the Dolls of New Albion. So now, this is a 4-act musical created by the artist is Paul Shapera. I hope I'm saying his last name right. I've actually never really heard it pronounced. Now, I'm going to start by introducing you all to this in the order that I was. So we're going to start with what I want to say is his first musical, and the others came later, but I could definitely be wrong, and I will double check this. Frankly, I should have double checked it before this, but the fandom has a lot of it's what you make of it kind of attitude. For example, there is no true order to listening to the entirety of the series, but I am going to introduce you all to it in the first 4 that I was introduced to. And then we will expound from there, and I will tell you where to listen to it. I will even link the Discord, the wiki, everything in the caption below. And all the art that I will be showing comes from the Wikipedia page, or the it's the fandom.com page, sorry, for the series itself. So that way I can have as much information as completely accurate to the series as I can, sprinkled in with some of my interpretations and theories. Because, of course, there have to be some, because this is a series that is actively developing. This is merely the start of the New Albion saga, which we're going to start with because that is where I started. Now, the first things that we are introduced to in the musical are the Gambler and the Monk, which is told in the story of New Albion 1, which is how the city came to be. This is told to us through the narrator, Kate. Now, Kate will become more important later on, and Annabelle will become important soon. Now, another important facet of this series is reincarnation, and the soul is not necessarily always truly gone. There are parts of a soul that carry on from one life to the next. Now, the Gambler and the Monk are in fact 2 such reincarnated souls that their story is not ever finished. The Gambler we will actually talk about multiple times throughout the series, as he is reincarnated, as we will talk about the Savior and, I don't want to call them the victim, but the savee, I guess. I don't know, the rescuee. I don't quite recall the full term. I will get to it when we get there, but as I said, one thing at a time. We're starting with Act 1. Now, after the Gambler and the Monk, as you may have heard, they kept their game going up until they passed. Or rather, at least up until the Gambler passed. But as the city matured and grew, then we have our first protagonist, who will be the first of 4 throughout this first musical. This first one will follow the McAllister family. Annabelle McAllister was, I believe it states that she was kicked out of school for her experiments with cadavers and stealing cadavers in particular. Now, it's said that, it's not necessarily said in the musical per se, but it is given to us through the wiki, through the artist, and background information that we are given as fans. So we are told that Annabelle, on the night that she was being expelled, her last night at the university, she met with a, let's call him just a gentleman that she had feelings for. It is unclear if they'd known each other before this. They might have seen each other in passing, having come from fairly wealthy families, the both of them. This is Jasper. His name is actually not said for quite some time in the musical, but Jasper is also very important. Also, I apologize for my handwriting. I'm actually not left-handed. I'm just ambidextrous. Yeah, I cannot draw or write an S quite right with my left hand. Now, Jasper, honestly, is a tortured soul. Jasper's life was not easy before Annabelle or after. He lived with the similar pressures that Annabelle did, which we'll get to hers in Act 2, actually. But Jasper's pressures were that he wanted to be a botanist, but his family wanted him, I believe, to go into medicine. But they wanted him to enter a more lucrative career. And he was pushed into that. He was given an arranged marriage with a woman he didn't love. And so the night that Annabelle was being expelled from school, the two were talking to each other. They had one night where they just bonded over their shared pressures and traumas of their own families and the expectations that they would be forced to try to live up to. And that one night, the two shared one kiss. And that was it. But she never moved on from Jasper. In Annabelle Raises the Dead, we hear that her mania has only continued. That she has just been obsessed with this idea that she could raise the dead. Perhaps apparently not as cadavers, but in the form of dolls. This is an artist rendering of Jasper as a doll. And Jasper as a doll is something that is actually quite common in the musical because, unfortunately, while he does follow his family's path and become he helps maintain the family money, he gets married, he has a child, but he dies in a car accident, unhappy and unfulfilled. And Annabelle is unable to cope with his loss. The man that she just truly loved and wanted to know better. But he was taken from her by circumstances and then by death. And she was always obsessed with death being something that she could overcome. Something that she could defeat, almost. And while the flesh cannot be reanimated, perhaps the soul is the key. Now, it's unclear how she figures out how to channel and bring souls back through Elysium. But she does succeed. And she brings Jasper back in this doll body. Now, unfortunately, it's said that he is not able to move. Now, some throughout the series do gain the ability to move with their doll bodies. In fact, some develop bodies made for this purpose. So it's possible that she just did not unlock the secret to that just yet, but she was able to bring their soul back. However, what she could not understand, at least at first, was that he didn't want to be back. He was placed inside this doll body, but he had no ability to speak. It took him time to learn how to manipulate radio waves, to piece together parts and pieces of songs or speeches heard over the radio to communicate to her. But she was so happy to have her friend, someone who was forced. She may not have seen it as being forced, but someone who was there with her, who could share in the things that she couldn't, who could be her comfort when she needed it. She was never comfortable going out because she was an eccentric, weird, rich girl. And maybe because she lived such a sheltered life, she was not accustomed to the trolleys and the cabarets, but these were things that she still wanted to experience. But she was, for the majority of her life, I believe, an only child. I don't think she knew a sibling in her lifetime. And again, that will come up in Act 2. But she had all this family pressure on her, that she had to be successful, that failure was not an option. Getting kicked out of school was probably a lot of pressure, but it seems that her parents may have already been passed by this point. But the ghost of pressure is still there, and it never truly goes away. But Annabelle, even knowing that this is what she wants eventually, she does hear him. But we also hear Kate, the narrator of this musical, trying to communicate to her, singing to her about circles that cannot break themselves, cycles of trauma and abuse that just cannot end unless someone can see them. But because Annabelle is trapped in such a circle, she cannot hear what Kate is begging her to hear from her. All she can hear is what she wants, that she needs her angel, Jasper, to come and just be with her, be that comfort, just be someone that's just always with her, her person. But her person is no longer truly there, and he doesn't want to be there. He is forced against his will to remain on the physical plane, separated from those he's already lost and loved. He has essentially been killed twice now, because he was at peace, and then he was ripped out of Elysium. Because she needed him. And sadly, as I said, he is a tortured soul who unfortunately has to go through this a couple of times. Alright, and a slight costume change, per se. Now, the shirt is actually very faded, but you might be able to read Voodoo Punk there. That, we'll get to very soon. But first, we're still in Act 1. Now, here in Annabelle Has a Doll, Annabelle is so caught up on the fact that she has a friend that she can't truly hear what Jasper wants. She can hear that he's playing the radio, but she doesn't really listen to what the radio waves and pieces that he's putting together are saying. And Kate, who I have theories about why she is particularly here narrating this tale, but she knows that Jasper doesn't want this, and she wants the best for Annabelle, because I believe she is here to help this as a reincarnation of the last soul that she wasn't able to help her in her last life, and now Kate, as the narrator, wants to try and gently influence the story in a direction that is beneficial to her, so that she can have that happy ending. But we hear how she's just longed for someone who's there for her, which is something that is echoed from her previous life. But here we can hear where Elysium is first mentioned in the musical. Small thing, that line, I know it's just a vocalization, but to me it sounds like you're saying like, oh, why'd you bring me here? Like he finally got to snap at her a little bit, you know? And this is when she finally does truly hear that he doesn't want to be here. And now during Annabelle's Lament, which is the second to last act or song of Act 1, the last song of Act 1 is mostly just Kate explaining that this show is not done, we have more to tell. But in Annabelle's Lament, we hear that she understands that Jasper didn't want this, that she was wrong. And she resolves to lock her research away. And where she does is very important. It seems to be that she uses, for lack of a term, just a trunk in the attic that to her was nothing but a place for horrible memories that you are not to look back upon. Now, that is an influenced decision based on her own family. But through this song, we hear that she was told she had to be a success. It didn't necessarily matter in what form, but she had to be worth something. If she wasn't a success, then she was worth less. And while less could mean less than somebody else, in her mind, it was just nothing. Because she was competing, in my opinion, with a ghost. It is my opinion that the McAllisters potentially had a daughter before Annabelle, who died young. Now, it could be through illness or accident, that is never clear. But the thought of this is just very briefly mentioned, and I pick up on this, and it is my interpretation that through that, we get that this family wanted success. They wanted children. And the more children they have, the more options they have to get success, to build the family name into something truly worthwhile. But when they lost their first daughter, Annabelle then became the holder of all this pressure. And when her parents passed, yes, in a way there was freedom, but that freedom was still tethered because that money came from them and still carried their expectations. She couldn't disappoint them because she strongly believed that souls and ghosts were real and that those who had passed on maybe could still see her or know what she was doing. And that was part of what inspired her to bring Jasper back. But knowing that he was so unhappy, she did destroy his doll. She did release him to go back to Elysium. Now, he unfortunately only got, I would guess, 20 years of that, sadly. We enter Act 2 and New Albion 2. The city is continuing to grow and change as it does. This is the next generation. Now, the next character that we are going to follow is actually Annabelle's son, Edgar McAllister. I feel like I can't write again. That'll do. That D looks weird, though. I can't help it. Now. Oh, well. Here we are. Now, this is a very cute image, actually. Wish I could blow it up better than that. But we have Kate here at the end, Jasper in one form, Annabelle, and her son, Edgar. Now, his darling Faye with whom he wants to wed. Faye. Now, I will actually pause this in a moment. But yes, the dwarf and the mob boss, actually, the redhead dwarf, while he's not important to this first musical, he does become more important to a spin-off musical, which is in the expanded universe. Which, again, I can talk about once we get there. If we want to go in chronological order, that's actually sooner than you'd think. Okay. Now, jumping ahead a little bit to Edgar Gets His Heart Broken, we are now in Act 2. Now, New Albion has grown, it has changed. The redhead dwarf that was mentioned in New Albion 1 has died. He was stabbed by his son so that his son could take over, and it made him very proud, in fact, that his son was so bloodthirsty to take over the mob. There are businessmen thriving, and there are, in fact, 2 thieves that are just masterminds. And they're not super important. They're just kind of a background thing that's something notable about the town. But now, jumping to Edgar Gets His Heart Broken, it's unclear if he was planning to propose or just this was another date for them. But Edgar went out with Faye, and she tells him that she loves someone else. There's someone else in her life that she wants more. She doesn't want him. It's implied that he is wasting away his family money, that she wants someone who has ambition. And in doing so, he is actually given such ambition, although it's very malicious in its intent. He doesn't want to get her back to prove that he can be what she wants. He wants to get her back to prove that he can get what he wants, that he will get what he deserves. So, in fact, after she leaves him, he tries to maintain some normalcy at the restaurant, but all he can think about is that she just left him. She tried and couldn't do it anymore. To him, that means that she didn't really put that much effort in. She was trying to make him something in his mind. And he, I guess, maybe wasn't ready for it or just didn't want it yet. But when he does want it, he becomes ruthless in business. And it inspires his ambition to just destroy her family money so that she has no choice but to marry him, to save herself almost. Now, it is not told yet, but Faye is connected to Annabelle and Jasper in a way. Well, she's connected more so to Jasper. She is the daughter of Jasper, in fact. Now, this, I think, solidifies that these two families might have actually been closer than we first thought. That, well, maybe not intermarriages and whatnot yet, but they were in the same circles of wealthy New Albionites. And so that is likely how Edgar and Faye met. I didn't write her name down. But so Edgar, now determined to show her that he is better than she thought he was, he goes and rifles through the old trunk in the attic. And there's many things that he finds in the old trunk. And I'm going to pull that up to go over them here. And this is where I think it really starts to tell us some of what the McAllister life was like in the early days of New Albion. Yeah, grandmother's broken heart, I think, refers not to Annabelle, but her mother. We have ballet shoes, dead soldier's cross. Now, the candlesticks is an interesting one, but it's not really clear enough. So there was a great uncle, but he is not ever mentioned again, so we can kind of ignore him. But the most important things are, to me, a dress for a child but hardly worn, stained in the memory and tears, for a name you'll never learn. Now, because this song is sung to Edgar by Kate, she is telling him that there was a child and a name that you will never know because they have long since passed. Now, that is my belief that there was a child before Annabelle, that her mother had these expectations and ambitions for a daughter, and that's part of why Annabelle had so much pressure on her. But in the trunk was, unfortunately, also the formula to raise the dead, and however she did it, Edgar was able to figure it out. And his thought was to capitalize on this, and he would build bodies and then bring souls back. Now, the problem with this is that these bodies were not at all constructed for movement. They did have a radio feature so that they could communicate, the same as Jasper had done, because that was the first model. But they aren't able to truly communicate because they can only take from what is being put out on the radio. Similar now, the AI, sorry, we will actually get to proper AI later on in the series, but the dolls cannot communicate effectively because they have such limitations on their radios. And as I said, they work similar to AI in that they can only take what they have and regurgitate it to make a sentence. Honestly, also very similar to the way Vocaloids worked, where your voice becomes digitized and becomes the library of sounds. Now, they are forming thoughts and sentences when they finally do speak, but the problem, again, is that they are limited. They can't move. And because many of them are not able to speak or communicate effectively, it is impossible for the first generation of dolls to actually be confirmed if they are the soul that they intended to be. So it's entirely likely that someone brought back, say, their grandmother, or tried to, and it was someone completely different. But it didn't matter, because part of the business was that they would project upon these dolls that they were who they wanted them to be. In fact, a black market even opened up where people could bring back people they hated so that they could continue to torture them in a doll body, throw darts at them, and tear them apart as they pleased, because they were trapped in these bodies. It was not only understood what that was by those who could misuse it, it was exploited by those who would misuse it. And Edgar built his business, again, not to monetize and build a business really for himself to improve the family name. He just wanted revenge. He specifically wanted them to be big enough to destroy the business of the man that stole Faye from him. Now, the man that stole Faye, Psylocke, he does not have an image, but that's alright. As you can hear there, Edgar only wanted this so that he could prove that he was better than the man Faye left him for. Now, in the next song, which I should skip to, but I don't want to, he brings Faye to him and shows her that he is not only better than the man she left him for, but he can give her something that no one else can. He brought Jasper back once again. Her dear long dead dad. But the only way she can ever see him or talk to him is to come back and marry him. And so Faye is given a very difficult choice on whether or not she can ever speak to her father in any form truly. But she would have to endure a life with Edgar, who didn't even love her. She had loved him once, but that love was now gone. And the love that he had was never truly there, I think. He wanted to possess her because she was an equal to him, monetarily, I think, or in stature. And he wanted someone who was equal, even if he hadn't done anything to maintain that status for himself yet. And so, when she eventually makes the very difficult decision to marry him, they then do have a child. Byron, who becomes important in Act 3. But the legacy at this point of the McAllisters is one purely of pressure to succeed. That there had to be success for the family to matter. And that was the biggest part of the McAllisters. Upon the third generation with Byron, that starts to fade. And yet, they still truly don't hear Kate. And Kate, as a narrator, she is trying to be heard. She is trying to tell us this story, but also to try and nudge the characters to hear her and just maybe don't make such a bad decision. Maybe, go this way instead of that way. Narrators throughout the series have a great amount of power. And while Kate does have that power, she doesn't want to abuse it. She wants them to have their free will, to do things that they would choose to do. Because it's not a true story. It's not their truth if they wouldn't have done it. And so, unfortunately, many of them do not listen to her, unfortunately. And so that is where I will leave off with Act 2. We move into Act 3 with Byron and the Voodoo Punks. Well, thank you for tuning in. This is Bella. She's been hanging out with me the whole time, even if you couldn't see her. As I said at the start, I am Caen Dusk. I am Caen on all platforms. You can catch me on Twitch. Here on my YouTube channel, I'll be posting some of my gaming videos soon, too. In fact, you can also read my work on AO3 soon. And if you can't wait for that, you can check it out on Patreon. It's a pretty low tier to read it, and spicy stuff will be a little bit higher, but it'll be available sooner for you if you want to check it out. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Caen Dusk. Have a good one.